So our next speaker, Deb Liu, needs no introduction. She's a VP of Platform and Marketplaces at Facebook, and she is a co-founder of Women in Product, and recently joined Intuit's board of directors. So congrats, Deb. But what you don't know about her is that Deb is incredibly supportive and passionate about women in product and women in tech. And as a recipient of her generosity on many occasions, I can totally attest to that. And so one of the things that I wanted to reflect on was the biggest lesson that I've learned from Deb. And that would be, so as I reflect upon it, I think the lesson is the importance of showing up every day with compassion, with vulnerability, with essentially authenticity, and also, having a certain amount of fearlessness in how you show up every day. And so I'm really excited and thrilled to welcome Deb, and we'd love to hear her perspectives on finding your voice.
Thank you. I have a mic here. Thanks so much. So we're going to do a little exercise before I talk officially. And I want you, as you do this exercise, to do one thing, which is, what is the one-word feeling? I'm going to show you some pictures. And I want three of you to just say whatever's on your mind when you see this image, okay? Okay, first thing that comes to your mind, three women. Come on. Okay, heard old, I heard dated. What else?
Male-dominated.
Male-dominated, okay. What do you think when you see this image? Design. Okay, what else? Closed. What else? Desire. What is? Innovation. Okay. Here's another set. What do you think? Addiction. I like that. I like that. Sugar. Anything else? Plastic. Okay. Obesity. What about this? Same thing. Okay. All right. That's interesting. Here. Yahoo. I heard a lot of sighs. There are people from Yahoo here. What about someone from Yahoo who's worked at Yahoo? Okay. What would you say?
At Yahoo right now.
Okay, okay, at Yahoo right now. What would you say?
Going through a transition.
Transition. Okay. Is there somebody else in the back who raised their hand? Okay, go ahead.
I just feel sad.
Sad. Okay, so who else? Anybody else? Iconic. Okay, what about this? Search. Everywhere. Huge. This? Oh, fast. Obesity. Okay, what else? Franchise. And this? Fresh. Yummy. What else? Fast. Okay. What about this? Mustache. Fun. Convenient. And the final one is this. Sexist? Arrogant? Wrong turns. Okay, so it's very interesting, right? Because why? These are just images, right? Some of them were even pictures, like there weren't even words with them. What is it that there was just something I flashed on there and immediately something came to mind, whatever that was, right? Whether it was dated or fresh or delicious, whether it was plastic or old or sad, like an image and a brand evokes something in your mind, right? So this is a little bit different though, because I'll show you what's next, which is as you find your voice, people aren't brands, but they actually evoke something different. And when you talk about people aren't brands, is a brand means something. It means a service. It means a thing to each person who sees it, right? It means that you have a feeling about whether you want to go to In-N-Out or McDonald's when given that choice. When you open your phone and you actually had a ride home tonight, you're going to have to choose whether you're going to take a Lyft or an Uber. And when you look at those icons, there's something in your head that triggers, I want this and I don't want that. And that's actually really interesting because we have that same feeling about people. People are very different from brands in a lot of ways, but the one way it's the same is that when someone meets you, when someone talks to you, do they want more or less? That's the question I ask you. Like, when they see you, when they spend time with you, are they like, I hunger to spend more time with you. I want to learn more from her. I would love to be mentored by her. I think the things that she says are really insightful. Or do they say, you know, she was just really a tourist in this meeting. She wasn't really a participant. She really didn't say that much. She really didn't show up. What do people leave every room that you sit in with? That's the question you should ask yourself. And I'll give you 2 other images to look at. So here's an image. I do not know how I found this, but she put this on the summit presentation, so I'll use it. What do you think about this person? What do you think she is? Powerful? Confident? You notice how they take the picture from below. So they told me this is a tip that photographers use, by the way, if you want a photograph taken when you're speaking, to do it from below because you seem like elevated, you're looking outward and upward, right? This is what my life really is like. By the way, you won't notice this. We take these funny selfies. This is actually the front of my pantry, and it's like a U-shaped space that's just enough for my family. Okay, this is my husband. He's the general counsel of Coursera, and my 3 kids. And so you can see my oldest, Jonathan, Bethany, and Danielle there. This is what my life is really like, right? But if you met me like this, what do you think? Happy, a mom. But you know, every person is not one image. There are many, many things. So here's my whole family with my mom. This is my team at the Christmas party. This is the Intuit board announcement photo. This is actually my sponsor in the middle, a selfie with my daughter in Vancouver. You can see my whole team at F8. Every person is all of those things, right? So you can come in and say, this person is powerful, but are they also vulnerable? This person is outspoken, but are they also a good listener? The thing is, people aren't brands because they're multifaceted. I am every one of these people and so many other things that you can't see. And that's the thing about you and finding your voice, which is, what is that feeling you leave with people with? What is that one thing? Do they want more? And the question you should ask yourself is not if I landed the message I wanted to land, but do they feel what they need to feel walking out of this room? And so we'll talk more about that and how to get that. But that is a very important part of being a leader, especially for women. And so the question is, what is the one-word feeling for you? If you had to imagine, and this is the first question there. It's like, what feeling do you want people to have? The first feeling you would want people to have after meeting you for the first time. You shook hands with a bunch of people outside. They didn't know who you were. What did you want them to think about you? You can fill in the first one. There's six slots, I think, or 4 slots. But let's talk about the first impression you want to leave. Is it powerful, smart, engaging? Is it leader? Is it exciting? Or is it like quiet and unengaged? All of those things have described people that you've met, right? And you think about, do I want more of that? And so the thing is about a brand is it's usually one thing. It's usually a set of things. It's a service. The thing about a voice is it's all of you. It's everything you are. It's every photo, not a single photo of you. It is every photo of every facet of your life. It is having people know the real you. And that's incredibly hard. Like, being vulnerable opens you up to a lot of criticism. Being vulnerable is painful and it's hard. And we'll talk more about that and why I learned that lesson the hard way. Because, you know, the question I have for you is like, how do you want people to feel after speaking to you? So I'll tell you how a lot of people perceived me for many, many years. They said quiet, they said unassuming, they said analytical, they said smart, but they didn't say leader, they didn't say influential. I didn't have a voice. The problem was this. So I grew up in a small, small town in South Carolina. And I grew up in the 80s and 90s in a place where there are no Asian people. And you can only imagine what it's like to grow up in a small, small town in South Carolina, and it's probably like that and worse. You know, people would come up to us on the streets and say, like, go home to where you came from, right? This happened regularly. People were like brutal. I mean, people would ask questions about like, well, why are you in this country? Or where are you from? You know, all of these things happened almost every day. Getting made fun of, you know, being teased. And then also even teachers would be mystified because a lot of people had never left. I mean, we lived in a pretty small community. And I learned the one lesson that I needed to learn to survive there. I learned to be really quiet and not to have a voice. Because if no one notices you, then no one makes fun of you. If you're unobjectionable to everybody, then no one can say anything, right? And so that worked for many, many, many years. And by the way, one thing you'll learn in leadership is whatever works for you to get to the place you are is probably the Achilles heel for the rest of your life. the thing that gets you to leadership and success will probably be the one thing that holds you back in the long term. So this worked great. I went to Duke. I got an engineering degree in civil engineering, so I can code in Fortran and nothing else. And it was great. Computer labs, problem sets. It was awesome because I didn't have to say very much. And then I thought, hey, like a lot of the smart kids are going to consulting. I'll go into consulting. And my first performance review was like, you know what? You're really good at the analytical stuff. You're a great analyst, but you're not a great consultant because you never say anything. You never connect with anyone. And I'm like, what does that have to do with the job? I got the grade. I got the right answer for the client. And they said, that's not the point. That is not the point of your job. Your point of your job is connecting with people and helping them understand where you came from and how you got this data and how you are helping them. It's not about the actual slides. It is not about the analysis. And I still couldn't understand, like every performance review was the same. They were like, great analysis, really great insights, beautiful slides, but we can't give you the top rating because you just don't connect with people. And I was like, the thing that worked for me stopped working. So I thought, okay, I need to retrench. And so I went to business school. I went to the GSB, and yay for those of you in the GSB. And we took a class called Organizational Behavior. And they talk about how people respond in organizations and how leadership is built and how human resources work. And at the end of the class, there was a final exam. The last question was, what will you change about your behavior as a result of what you learned in this class? And I wrote, I will learn to be an extrovert at work. I will learn to speak up and find my voice. And I have been working on that ever since. I graduated in 2002, and it is still hard to this day, 15 years later. The thing is, it's a practice, right? And also, a lot of people will tell me, well, I'm kind of an introvert. This is really hard. And, I really just, don't like to talk to people, and I don't want to be objectionable. I don't know what to say. I feel like an imposter. I feel like that every single day. I feel like that standing up here telling you this. And the reason I say that is because it's okay, because it is just like practice. If I told you you had to learn to speak Spanish or Chinese to do your job, if somebody said, you know what, in order to land that client, you need to figure out how to speak Spanish to them enough that you could land that client, you would go do it. If I told you your next promotion was dependent on learning Chinese and being able to speak and actually do a talk in it, you'd probably figure it out because that's what's necessary. Well, what if I told you that finding your authentic voice is the thing that keeps you from success? Because you see so many women, particularly in this industry, and this happens to men too, but for women who just don't want to put themselves out there. They're afraid people will judge them. What if people think I'm too loud? What if I'm wrong? What if I disappoint people? How many of those voices are going on in your head as I talk, right? How many of those voices are telling you, stay quiet, stay back, don't be judged? And so the question for you is not what you feel inside, but how do you want people to feel listening to you? I was talking to this guy on my team, and he's really good at this. He's really good at, no matter what meeting we're in, everyone leaves just feeling excited, even if he said practically nothing. He says a lot of things, but I said, what is it that you do? How do you come up with the words? Because I called on him to talk about something. And he said, I focus purely on what I want people to feel when they leave the room. I can never remember what the things I said were, and it doesn't really matter. And I was like, you were really good at this. And he said, it's just the practice I've learned, which is I focus on the feeling. Are they inspired? Are they excited? Do they want to be a part of this project? I think about the future, which is how they feel about the project, not the words, the technical accuracy, because nobody remembers those things. And I learned a lot from him because a lot of times I'm afraid, what if I'm wrong? What if I say something wrong? People will judge me. How many of you have ever heard that in your head? Raise your hand. Okay, I can see most of your hands. And you think to yourself, right? You're self-talking yourself, right? And instead of focusing on the other person and that feeling you want to leave, you're actually thinking, well, what if I say this, will they think that? Did I talk too much? Did I talk too little? You're really inside of your head. But the thing about finding your voice is you are there present in that moment, and you are actually thinking about the other person and how your voice will impact them. So the first question is, how do you want people to feel after speaking to you? So there's 4 slots. You can fill it out with whatever you want, adjectives, nouns. Just think about for a moment what it is that you wish people would feel. Do you want them to think that you're powerful? Do you want them to be inspired? Do you want them to feel cared for? What are those things? Just fill that out for a second. The second question is how often do you actually achieve this from 0 to 10, from 1 to 10? 10 is you achieve this 100% of the time. All right, so how many of you said 10? Anybody? Okay, there's one person who said 10. Another person, so we have 2 people who said 10. All right, how many people said between 7 and 9? Good, we have a pretty good crew here. How many people said 4 to 6 or so? Okay, and how many were fewer, less than 4? So we have a few people as well. And so here's the question for you, which is like, what keeps you from achieving that? What keeps you from being a 10? For me, a lot of it is self-talk, actually. I'm constantly worried that I'll say the wrong thing. What if I embarrass myself? You know, what if people discover that I'm an imposter? What if people realize I have no idea what I'm doing? It's different for different people, but like as you go from conversation to conversation, I think that there's something that keeps you from being there 100%, from inspiring people or having them see your passion. Figure out what that thing is for you, because I think that's an important part of finding your voice. So here's the thing. Finding your voice really means telling your story. And so the question is, this question is interesting, which is, what is the story you tell yourself? What is that thing in your head that's playing most of the time? And then how does that translate to, what story do you tell about yourself? Because that's what people are hearing. They're hearing what you're telling yourself, and that's what they're seeing you tell about yourself. And the question then is, what do they perceive? Because that's really important. Like, people think it's really about the things that they say, but actually what you say is actually a reflection of what's in your heart, what you're thinking to yourself. And so if you're thinking something to yourself, you know, in the little box there, it talks about how much your words are actually not what people are hearing. It's your body language, it's your eye contact. When you tell stories about yourself, they're looking at you, your body language, your tone of voice, all of those things. And what they're not looking at is exactly the detailed words you're saying. And so that's why when you are thinking something, that shows in your body language, that shows in the way that you present yourself. And that's the story you're telling people. And so how do you change that story to something different? And so instead of focusing on the words, like a lot of times we're like, I need the perfect word, I need the perfect data, if I just had enough analysis, I just prepared enough. But instead focus on connection, right? If you could focus on connecting to the other person. I'll tell you an interesting story. So I started at Facebook after I had my second child, so I had a newborn. And I just left eBay. I was working part-time there and getting paid full-time. It was awesome. And you know, my friend recruited me to Facebook, and I thought, this is going to be insane. Like, I'm going to a company. I'm a very introverted person. I'm very shy. And I'm going to a company where people friend everyone they meet at every meeting. Like, this is going to be crazy. Like, how can you have, you know, and I remember somebody on my team said, Facebook is a really interesting place to work because it has a complete blurring of your work and home life. And he was right. And I thought, I can't do this. And so I went, and I was a little older than the average person there. And I had a couple kids. And so I was the only mom PM in the entire organization. In fact, there were only 6 women PMs, and I had 3 kids. So I used to joke that the average is actually a half, but I had to take care of all 3 of them when we go home. And the thing is, like, I was very unusual, right? I had come in through product marketing. I didn't have a CS background. And at the time, we had required CS degrees. We don't anymore. But we basically had done all of this work to like bring in all these women PMs, but like a lot of them felt very foreign. I felt very foreign. It was really hard, and I was constantly going, well, I have to go home to the kids, like, but I have all these obligations, and it was really, you know, I tried to figure out, like, everyone's heard of the mommy tax, right? Like, if people know you're a mom, if you put like you are at a PTA, like they are less likely to hire you, and they're going to pay you less. So I thought, well, if I talk about my family, it's going to be even worse because people are going to respect me even less. I already don't have a technical degree, and I have 3 kids, and everybody else is like single or just married. This is going to be really hard. But I realized something interesting, which was I started talking about my family. My kids are incredibly precocious, and I started this thing called #MommySchool. So if you friend me, you can see it. But basically, I would just write the funny things they say. I mean, really crazy things. And people would actually come up to me in meetings and say, hey, I read your mommy school thing, and it was really cute. And you know, someday when I have kids, I hope to have those conversations with them. And I realized that rather than them judging me for it, it actually turned the other way, where it was actually a moment of connection. These are people without children. These are people who have no idea what it's like to go home to like a colicky infant and 2 toddlers. But they were like, oh, it was so cute when they said this, or I really learned a lot when you talk to your kids this way and you try new things. And like, I realized that it was just a way for people to connect on something that even if we didn't have it in common, that they had a touchstone, that they could connect with me. And as I did more, I shared more about myself, about the struggles with my father was sick, and and as you talk more, people have more points of connection, where people are looking for commonalities. They're looking for ways to connect with you. But if you never open up, how are you going to find that? So that was the thing when I learned that connection was more important than commonality. That actually I am very different than a lot of people at Facebook. And it's okay, because at the time, I always used to joke with them, well, you're coming my way. You're probably going to have kids someday. And so you're going to join my crew. It's supposed to be joining your crew. So I'm not worried. Like someday you'll understand all of this. But it was really interesting because we would talk and actually have conversations around kids for people who didn't have kids. Or we would talk about what it was like to have a family and what we should do to support and bring in more moms. And I think it really opened up a lot of conversations. And so by focusing on something that they could connect to, it created areas of commonality where you can create a conversation on common grounds. And that actually opened up a lot of avenues for us to build relationships. And so the thing for you is, what is that one thing you wish people knew about you? What I wanted people to know about me for the longest time is I wanted them to know that you can be really serious about your job and also have a great family life. I felt like it was really hard in the early days, but now it's something which everyone knows, right? And so the question for you is what is that one thing at work right now? And this changes, by the way, over time. It has changed for me quite as my kids get older. But what is that one thing that you wish people knew? I was really worried about people judging me. And so I really wanted them to say, hey, she is on top of her game and she can have a great family life. And she can actually do the work and also recruit other women in the same position. And so for you, you have the next question there. What is that one thing for you? What is something you're passionate about? Today, for me, beyond the things about being a mom and things like that, is the thing that I care about now at this point in my career is I wish people knew how much passionate I am about bringing more women into tech. Because that is something I care so much about and I spend so much time on. And that is something that's going to make us better at all the work that we do. But these are the stories the questions, because your voice is changing over time. Now that more people have families and they're posting it more on Facebook, that's much less of an issue. So now it's, how do we bring in more women? How do we have more voices at the table? How do we change tech so that it's more women friendly? That's what I really care about today. And so then the question is, what story are you trying to tell in 20 words or fewer? What is that thing? So the thing that you want people to know, if you had to just tell the story, what do you say about it? What do you say about yourself in your bios? What do you post on Twitter and Facebook? What are the images you want to create? And how authentic is that to you? A lot of times people kind of have this idea they want this brand. And I'm sure every brand manager in the world has this idea that their brand is going to be pristine and wonderful, it's going to be valuable. But you saw a lot of those brands where people's perception and what the brand manager wants are completely divergent, right? And so if you pick something that is unauthentic to you, it will have that same cognitive dissonance. And so the question is, what do you inhabit? What can you live every day that people can say, yes, that is her story. That is what I want to be a part of. That is what I want to learn about her. So you can keep working on that. But then the question is, are you going to commit to it? Are you going to show up to every relationship looking for that connection? Are you going to think about the other person and their feeling on the other side? Or are you going to kind of shrink back and say, you know what, this is where I'm comfortable? Are you going to say, this is the story, and a year from now, I'm going to ask people, what do you think I'm passionate about? And they're going to be able to tell me. That's the question for you, which is what is that thing for you, and how much do you work towards it? How much time do you spend towards helping people understand your authentic self? I want people to know, yes, you can't have it all, but you can have an amazing career in tech, you can be successful, you can have a family life, and you can have a happy marriage. That it is crazy and it's insane. I have 5 kids in my house, my sister and her husband it sounds like there's 50 kids in there. And that's part of the fun and part of the craziness. And that life is messy and it's okay. These are the kinds of things that I want people to know about being in tech, which is tech is an amazing place for women because it's so flexible. I sneak out and go to like kids' performances and doctor's appointments all the time, but no one's looking at you at your desk. You don't check out, and you don't have to do all those things. And that's the thing that I want people to know. But what is that story for you, and how do you want to commit to it? So I asked that the last question is, what is the one thing you're going to do to commit to this? Well, how are you going to measure? All of you work on products, so there's got to be a metric, right? Because if no metric, it didn't happen. So what's that metric? Like if I went to one of you and I said, what's your metric? And a year from now, do you think you're going to make progress if we came back here? What would you say it is? The question for you is like, if you have a metric and then you look at your metric in a year, and we can email all of you in a year if you'd like, and see if you've made it, you would feel like, are you making progress? Like nobody goes, I'm going to ship a product in a year and I'll just see what happens. No, you plan towards it. How do I want people to feel about me? How do I want to present myself? What do I want them to say about me? And then you start planning towards it, right? So, what does your profile picture look like? What is it that you say? What are the articles that you share? Are people seeing the real you, or are you just sharing the things that look good? Because again, brand cognitive dissonance, where your voice doesn't match you, is the worst, right? A lot of those companies look at their brand and they have a focus group and someone's like, this is sad. And they're like, the brand manager is horrified because they're like, we spend millions of dollars making this brand about fun or delicious or exciting, and you said sad? So what is it that's authentic? What is real? What is that whole self that you bring? And then how do you bring it to every conversation, every post, every relationship? And how do you bring it so that you're fully there? And so as you think about finding your voice, I ask you to think about all of those things, which is how do you tell your story in everything you do every day? How open are you about who you are? And are you landing the message? And if I asked you in a year if you're going to hit that metric, how many of you are going to say yes? So I'm happy, about 10 minutes, I'm happy to take questions. And there were a bunch also on the SurveyMonkey.
You use the word authentic a few times, but sometimes when we look at the men around us, it feels like they're strutting the stuff, they look invincible.
Oh, she's going to get you a mic.
We're going to get the mic, and then so that everybody can hear the question.
Yes.
Is this the mic?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes.
Great. Can you introduce yourself first, please?
Hi, I'm Naba, and I lead product for samsclub.com, which is part of Walmart.
Yeah.
You use the word authenticity and being authentic as part of finding your voice. And increasingly, I'm finding that I see women leaders actually being authentic, being vulnerable. But right next to them, I see the men who are still acting like supermen or acting completely invincible. Yeah, I can do it. Whereas the woman is like, yeah, but we'll have to think about it. So, but if you as a woman leader are talking to other women leaders about us being authentic, but the men are not hearing it, are we constantly going to be in this struggle where we'll just be different and stuck? What's your...
This is a really interesting question. So there's a study, I think it was published in the Harvard Business Review, that said men are seen as leaders if they are confident, and women are only seen as leaders if they're confident and warm, right? So there's an extra thing that you have to do. And by the way, I'm not the warmest person in the world. I read that and I was like, oh. But the thing is, I realized that, my response to that, I actually shared that post and I said this, which is, we can fight against the structural injustices in the system. We can do that, and we should raise the alarm and make sure people see it. But we also, in order to lead, also need to conform to it to some extent. And that's part of it is like, if you went in there and you said, I can do this, I'm better than everybody else, like, do you think that's going to land well? That's really hard. You're threading this needle. And one of the challenges of being a woman leader is you have to be just warm enough. Somebody said to me once, like, being a woman leader is like literally just walking a tightrope every single day, right? You've got to be just warm enough, but not too soft. You want to say just enough, but you don't want to be aggressive, but you also don't want to be silent. You want to be assertive, but not too abrasive. You want to hold the line, but not be rigid. And that's what being a woman leader is like, especially in a field that's very male-dominated. But the thing is, part of threading that needle is kind of finding the place that's authentic for you. I was telling a male colleague of mine how this is what it's like being a woman leader. And he's like, do you ever feel like you're wearing a mask and you're being inauthentic? And I said, no, not at all, actually. I feel like I have to be extra authentic. Like I have to embody all of these things because otherwise it'll feel really fake and it would be really hard for me. And he's like, it's really interesting because I never knew that you were thinking all these things all the time. And it was funny, I was doing a talk with somebody and he said, for the first time after a talk, someone said I should really smile more. And he's like, I have never heard that, but I hear women hear that a lot. And I was like, really? And the thing is, it happens to us all at Smile More, right? Or, why aren't you happy? Or things like that, right? How many times have you heard that? And he's like, yeah, I've been working in this industry for like 20 years and no one ever said that to me. And it was a very interesting experience because I really didn't know how to take it. And I thought, okay, and we had a good conversation about it. But I think it was very interesting to kind of hear it and he's a great ally. And I just remember this conversation because he was authentically trying to understand. And he was the one who encouraged me to write this note called Threading the Needle, which is like how there's this extra tax, that what you wear or how you present yourself, all of those things matter so much more for women than men. And so do I think that it's fair? Absolutely not. But do I think the reality is that we have to conform to it to some extent to become leaders? Absolutely. We can fight against it and not do it and just not be leaders too. But I don't think that's the right thing. But if there are enough of us who are in that position, then we can change things. But it's a lot harder if all of us say, you know what, we're just not going to do it. We're going to opt out. Like, if you actually look at the stats around kind of age 35, women opt out of tech at 2x to 4x the rate, depending on the industry, right? And so if none of us ever make it to senior leadership, how do we change things? And so instead, I'm just focused on getting as many women to senior leadership as possible, and it'll be a lot easier for all of us in this room to change everything, so that when we see two people doing that in a room, we can call it out and say, hey, like, you're saying everything's okay, but she's pointing out these things. Let's talk about where we are. And you can actually open up and have that conversation about differences in the way people talk. Because now you're in a position to say that, and it's really, you're teaching the future leaders to not have that bias.
Other questions?
There's one in the back. Oh, okay, why don't you go first, and then we'll have the person in the back there. Yes.
It's on? Oh. Deb, first of all, I just want to say thank you. In the last 45 minutes, I already feel so much better about everything that you're talking about. And it might also be the wine, but who knows?
Okay. We should serve more wine.
Hey. So as you talk about senior leadership, I was going to ask a different question, but
Yeah.
I really want to ask this one. So when I talk to my female friends in any industry, tech or otherwise, all of them seem to have had both female managers or leaders or directors that are very supportive of them, and then also some that are very not supportive of them, that seem threatened by them, that don't want to help them sort of get into those senior leadership roles. For those of us who are trying to navigate this space, what do you recommend we do?
So, the studies show that women have more mentors and men have more sponsors, right? And they said that women get a lot of advice, but men get doors open for them. And that's how leadership works. Like, if you look at studies, this was a study not done in tech, it's done across many industries. It just said women just are given tons of advice of things to try, and men get opportunities. And it's because they have sponsors. And so, I showed you a picture of my sponsor. Sponsors can be men or women. And I think that there are probably men who held them back equally to women, but we focus on women a lot. I actually think that the queen bee syndrome, for the most part, is a myth, because I think we isolate that because we think every woman should be the perfect manager. But in actuality, there's a lot of crappy women managers and a lot of crappy male managers too. So, but I do think that having a sponsor is very important, someone who's going to open doors for you. That is the most important thing, whether they're male or female. So the thing about sponsors, and the secret behind sponsors, is that people tend to sponsor people who are most like them. That's just how it works. They looked at all the studies and they said people, like senior leaders, tend to sponsor people who are similar to them because they see something in that person that's like them. Well, look at the senior leadership of most of the companies in America. What does that mean, right? And so the question then is like, what does that mean for us? But there are so many people who are willing to sponsor us. But a lot of it is really finding that connection, finding that relationship, and finding that manager who says, you're a diamond in the rough, and I'm going to invest in you. I'm going to give you real feedback. Women get less clear feedback because they're worried that women will be too emotional and can't take it. it's really depressing reading studies, by the way, so don't spend too much time on it. But the point is, I'll distill the interesting things. But the thing that's really interesting about that is, given all of those facts, what does that mean for us? It means that we have to work a little harder to find a sponsor that fit with somebody who's going to help us. But it also means when we reach senior leadership that we have to help other people. I sponsor a lot of people, and I spend a lot of time on their careers and try to help them. And it's really important to me because I feel like if I don't do this, who will? And it's really important, but a lot of it is, can I see this person taking the seat someday? And I see so many people who can if they just did this one thing, if they just changed this. And so I really focus on people who are in the learning mindset. And so the question for you is like, what is keeping you from being sponsorable? You can't change the fact that they haven't picked you, but what keeps you? So I'll tell you for the people I didn't sponsor. I've mentored a lot of people that I ended up not sponsoring. The people who are very rigid and don't have a learning mindset. That I find is just, I cannot change that. And there have been a few people I've mentored or helped out where I literally just felt like they couldn't learn and they couldn't listen. And I tried and I felt like this wasn't going anywhere. Another one is people whose confidence is so shaken that it's really hard. Like you spend most of your time just bolstering their confidence. Because then we spend most of our time in unproductive things, and I just felt like that wasn't, like they're just never gonna get there. And I found that really, really difficult. I tried with a couple people and I just figured that was not the best investment. Other people obviously lack skills and things like that, and I'm not worried about that. So the question is, do you listen to feedback? When someone gives it to you, do you circle back and say, thank you so much for that feedback? I got this feedback from another VP. He's like, hey, you're doing this thing all wrong. I need you to do this thing. And he works in a totally different area, and he's like, you need to and he was somebody who had been my manager and sponsor many years ago. And he just gave me some unsolicited advice recently. And so it was a little jarring because it was an area we never talk about. And then he's like, you just need to do this thing. And I was like, okay. And I did it, and it worked. And then I forwarded it to him, and I said, hey, you had suggested I do this thing, and here's what I did. Thank you so much for speaking up and giving me feedback in an area that I didn't know that was a blind spot for me. I really appreciate it. Do you think he's going to give me advice in the future or not? Do you think he's going to look out for me just a little bit more? And again, he was always a huge supporter when I worked for him, but I left his organization a long time ago. And the thing is, are you that person that seems teachable? Are you the person who seems like, I'm going to thank you and actually show the results of you taking the time to do this thing? Or are you the person who's like, well, I'm just not going to listen to that, right? So there's a lot of barriers. You can't fix everything. You cannot fix everything, but then can you fix yourself in such a way that makes you sponsorable? And then can you find that person? And actually, if you don't have that relationship with your manager, are you willing to do the work to figure out why? And that's a lot. It's a lot about connection, and it's a lot about relationship. And so I don't think it's a super easy equation. I don't think every manager is awesome. And I don't think every woman is a great mentor, but neither are all men. And so I would judge based on the individual case and whether you make that connection.
Okay, so we're going to take two more questions. So there's one here, and then we'll take the two with the mics.
Okay, great. Hi.
Hi, my name is Gal. I'm a Director of Product Management at Capriza, which is a small startup in Palo Alto. I'm curious to hear a little bit about how this works at Facebook, because you're a senior leader. You have Sheryl Sandberg as a very senior leader in the company. So how do you feel Facebook is different than other companies because of that?
I think, so on the tech side, there are not as many women leaders. Sheryl runs the business side. But there is a desire to have diversity, right? There's a desire to have all your voices heard. And so that's the part that I love, is that people are very open to the conversation. You actually you call each other out. When someone says bossy, you're like, don't say that. When people say it's a two-man job, you're like, no, it's a two-woman job. You can say that without irony, right? Because we have that conversation, and that's what's great about it. But, could we have more women leaders? Absolutely. But so could most tech companies. And so that we care enough about it. The great thing about Facebook is they care enough about it to at least open the door to have the conversation. There are so many companies who just refuse to acknowledge there's a problem, right? Pretend that it doesn't exist, that say, well, we're just trying to hire the best people. We don't want to lower the bar. By the way, that statistically is incorrect, because the more people you have in a pool to choose from, the more likely you are to pick somebody who's good. People who say that do not understand statistics, but the point is, if that's the default culture, if the default culture is, well, we wouldn't want to lower the bar, I guess we'll take anyone who's really diverse and good, but that's a very different default position. The great thing about working at Facebook is that's not what it is like. It's very, very different.
Question over here.
Yeah, hi, my name is Richie Goyle, and I'm a product director at IBM, and I look at Watson APIs, and I'm trying to find business cases for them. So my question to you is like, first of all, thanks for all the tips, is around the connection piece. So usually, most of the people I connect with very well, but there have been times in my life when I tried to connect with people above me, and they were just like so closed and like, so do you have any tips? Like, what are the different things that you can try out, like to build that connection when you're starting new and you don't know much about those people, and every time you try to reach out, they try to shut themselves. So thanks.
So people like to talk about themselves. So often it works if you ask people about themselves. Like, ask them a question where it's, hey, I'm new to town. Like, I would just love to hear, like, what is a great place to take, if they have kids, like, great place to take kids to the park, right? It's really hard for people to just shut that down and say, well, I don't go to the park. Or, like, they're going to say something. But, like, what common ground can you find? Did you work at the same company? Did you live in the same city? There's something about everybody that is connectable. Not everyone is easily accessible. There was one person I worked with who we just could not get on the same page. Like, we worked very closely together, and it drove both of us crazy. And it turns out that, I just wasn't listening. Because I listened to his style, and it drove me so crazy that I just couldn't hear everything he said. And over the years, we came to an understanding where we realized that, like, we were so annoyed by each other's style that we were working well together. And now we work great together because we were willing to have that hard conversation saying, hey, we're not on the same page. How do we get on the same page? And sometimes it does take that, hey, like, I feel like you and I aren't connecting, and calling it what it is, and calling the elephant in the room an elephant and saying, hey, look, I've tried really hard to build a relationship here, but I feel like I'm not connecting with you. Like, is there something I'm doing that I could be doing differently? And somebody said that to me recently. They said, I feel like you meet with my peers and you get to know them, but you don't know me very well. And I said, oh, I didn't realize, like, it didn't occur to me that they had been trying to connect with me. So I said, well, what is it? And they said, well, I just feel like, you just understand their parts of the business better. Like, can we spend more time together? And I said, sure. I didn't realize you felt this way. And he said, well, the problem is I feel bad taking up your time. And I said, well, I want that part of the business to go well too. Let's talk about how we can unlock that. And we had a really good conversation around some of the challenges that he's been having. And I realized that, those are things that I can help with. But for a long time, he would meet and just ask me a bunch of, like, very specific questions, and I would just answer them. But we never really connected on a real level. But by him saying that, it opened the door for me to say, hey, you're right. Like, I didn't spend any more time thinking about it before, but now that you've said it. And a lot of times in relationships, it really is just, do the DTR, like determined relationship kind of talk, where you just need to know where you stand. Like, hey, I feel like we're not connecting. I don't think we're on the same page. Like, what's going on? And a lot of times that opens up so much more connection. I have this thing we call high bandwidth relationships, where so there was another executive that our teams disagreed a ton. We were not super close, and we just didn't know each other very well. And I said, how about we do this? We just do a high bandwidth relationship. If anyone hears any conflict on our teams, we'll just tell each other. Okay, we'll go to Messenger and we'll just tell each other. We'll just pretend that, like, everyone else doesn't exist, that it's called a high bandwidth relationship, which means we will just say anything. And so I was like, okay, let's try this. And the two of us tried this together. And there was this conflict that they had for 3 weeks naming some product that our teams were working on together. And I said, how about this? And he goes, oh yeah, sounds good. And I'm like, they spent 3 weeks and we spent like 3 minutes thinking about it and naming the product. And then something came up where we put out a video and he's like, you didn't include my team in the video, and they felt really bad about it. I was like, you're right. Like, it was those little pieces of friction that were actually causing our teams to have friction with each other. We just didn't spend that much time together, and so we didn't know. But we realized that just the smallest thing. So my team recut the video and put it out that day and let his team post it. And the point is, it was not about the video, and it wasn't about, like, all of these, like, naming. It was really about a relationship, which is, can you trust each other? Or do you have that relationship where it's two-way? And so again, just finding ways to build that connection really changed the way that we talk to each other. And it made our teams work better together also.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Deb.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.